All right, y'all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're tuning in. We're grateful to have you here on the Preferred Experience podcast. Will Barrett, Stacy Mills, and as always, a very special guest that we're going to tune you into here in just a minute. But before we do anything, it's incumbent on me to wish the man across the table from me, Stacy Mills, a very happy birthday.
Yeah, you know, I get paid double to work on my birthday.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do, which is way more than you make single.
Yeah.
At least double.
At least double.
At least double. And so hopefully I'll get some of that kick up too. So haven't seen it yet, but looking for it. Looking for it. So anyway, it's been a few weeks since we've been able to come on here.
Yeah, you know, it's like we had something going on here for the last 7 weeks.
A little thing called Private Lines football that takes up a whole lot of time. Whole lot of time, and it's been a wild few weeks with this football team from the lowest of lows to now getting towards some of the higher highs we've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, it makes it fun. I mean, it really does. The growth of the team here in the last few weeks has just been phenomenal to watch them grow, and you could just tell just by being around Coach Wallace going from, you know, you could see it in his eyes to you can see it in his eyes now.
Yeah. He kept saying, just hold on. They're better than this. And lo and behold, they were a lot better than that. Yeah. A lot better than that. Homecoming weekend last weekend, and lots of folks in from all over the country coming back home to Prattville High School. And one of the classes honored on the field was the class of 1973.
Wow.
1973, and that was a pretty good class. Pretty good class of Lions, and one of those guests happens to be joining us today. A guy we've been trying to get on for a couple of weeks, but for whatever reason, we kept not being able to make it happen because of scheduling conflicts. The guy's awfully busy, just like us. Michael Moseley, but you don't know him by that name. You know him by his tribal name, SpiritWalker. So, SpiritWalker, welcome to the Preferred Experience.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to be in this preferred podcast pod.
You're in this. In the man lounge.
It's like when I walked in the door and I walked all the way through. It's like Sports Center meets Blockbuster Videos. That's
it's a lot like that. Yeah.
It's interesting decor in here. I love it though. It's great.
Sports Center meets Blockbuster Video. Two things that are. One thing is defunct and one thing almost defunct now, Sports Center. But yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
But you connected with you a few weeks back, and you sent me your bio, and you've done some really interesting stuff. I mean, we've had some people on here that do all that have gotten into different things and do different stuff, but you are like a journeyman. You've done a whole lot of things. But I want to start with your birthplace, Roswell, New Mexico. Right? Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah, Roswell, New Mexico.
Apache Indian.
Mm-hmm. Chiricahua.
And you are given the name SpiritWalker.
Yes.
This is the name that everybody knows you by. And even we'll get into the fact that you're an accomplished author who's on the book here. I'm looking at it right here for you folks watching on YouTube. The Mayberry Rerun Watcher's Guide. We're going to get into this. SpiritWalker wrote this, but how did you come up? How were you given the name SpiritWalker?
Well, you know, in our culture, you don't get an Indian name until you're 50 moons old. That's right around 4. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you're given a name based on a personality trait, an event that happens to you, or characteristic, physical characteristic. So you get a baby name at 4 years old. My baby name was Little Spirit because my dad said I was like a little spirit. I would sneak in and get things I wasn't supposed to and never get caught. You know, things like that.
Yeah.
Of course, my younger brother, Limping Buffalo, he wasn't so good at it.
Is that real?
So then when you are right around 12, just like most cultures, you go through your manhood ceremony, and they could change your name. They don't always, but they could. And so my name was changed to SpiritWalker, which means one who walks with the spirit of his ancestors.
Very cool.
And so that's where the name came from. And I think, you know, I'm only about 20 years away from being changed to needs a walker. So
Well, you're only as old as you feel, and, and
That's
it
right.
looks to me like you feel pretty young.
I feel pretty good. Feel pretty good for class of 73.
Class of 73. Now, you came to Prattville in 68?
69. Yeah.
69?
My dad went to Vietnam.
And then from Prattville, you have a similar tie. You have a tie to one of our guys, Ricky Rose.
Ricky Rose, yeah.
Both of you guys stationed at Altus Air Force Base.
Stationed at Altus Air Force Base. That's right. I was stationed there for 11 years.
And you did something. Ricky did combat photography, but you did survival training.
Survival training. I was a survival instructor.
Talk about that SEER training that you did.
Yeah, that's the only career field I would have wanted to be in the military. It was fantastic. It was I was in a 1-level deep slot at Altus. And Ricky, I smelled the brown breeze for 11 years, okay? I know exactly what you're talking about. It was 56 miles from Fort Sill, which is an Army post in Lawton, Oklahoma. And so I would take crew members, I would give them annual refresher training on survival techniques. We all start out at Deep Creek. Well, back then it was called Deep Creek. It was a base on the backside of let me get this right, Fairchild. I lived in Fairfield and Fairchild. I get them confused. Fairchild was the Air Force Base in Washington, and we were on a base right behind it. It was a little bitty post. It was only survival school. We had a POW camp that was built not too far from there, and we trained up near the Canadian border. This is in Washington State. So when I got the 1-level deep slot in Oklahoma, I had to find a training place. So I'd take them to Fort Sill, and I worked it out with the Army. And so when we did escape and evasion, which was my specialty, combat survival, we'd do escape and evasion, and the Army would chase them through the woods, and they loved that. They loved to chase those fly boys through the woods, because here's these, we call them zipper-suited sun gods, that would come out there and think they know everything. They do in the air, but when they get on the ground,
Different world.
Completely different world.
Exactly.
And so we chased them through. And so that's what I did. When Desert Storm kicked off, I tried to get over when Desert Shield kicked off, which was prior to Desert Storm. I tried to get over there, and they kept saying, "No, we need you here to give out briefings to all the crews that are flying from here over to Iraq." And so I said, "Okay." So I stayed. They opened up a slot in Panama. I tried to get it. I was trying to go anywhere, just to be going and support the effort.
Sure.
And then my bosses at headquarters SAC, Strategic Air Command back then, called and requested me personally to be sent. So they sent me. And I got there, not a week probably before Desert Storm kicked off, and was able to set up all the decontamination shelters in Germany in case they hit us with chemical warfare.
Which they fully intended to.
They fully intended to, and we fully intended or thought they would. And so they sent me to Germany first, and we set up the underground shelters on the backside of Ramstein Air Base in Germany, and so that if they got hit with chemicals in country, as we call it, being over there in the war, they would fly to Germany, park on the hot spot in the backside of the base. We'd usher them underground, do the decontamination, and they would be quarantined down there for a couple of days. So we had bunks. I mean, it was a whole underground network.
Wow.
And then I also hopped C-141s back and forth into Saudi Arabia and did in-country briefings on safe areas, which stands for selected areas for evasion, and teach them where, if they get shot down in Kuwait or Iraq, where to go to find friendlies. Where are the good forces? Where do we have? Because we were there before they even knew we were there.
Right.
We had FAC, forward air controllers, on the ground directing the airstrike that hit Baghdad. They were already in Baghdad.
So it wasn't like we knee-jerked and went and did this.
No, they had
very calculated.
They had FAC people on the ground directing airstrikes, giving coordinates, hit this building.
And you're there in the thick of it.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. It was
Yeah, I actually went to college with a friend of mine that was from here from Prattville, Dr. Daryl Covington. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was one of the guys on the ground lasing targets.
Really?
Yeah, he couldn't tell us a whole lot, but
those guys.
But the stories he told you would just blow your mind.
Mm-hmm. Those are some brave guys in there saying, "Yeah, hit this coordinate," and then trusting that pilot to hit that coordinate and not them.
Right?
They're that close.
Hold that laser steady.
But those guys were good, and but our guys were just fantastic over there.
You did 13 years in the Air Force, and then things got really interesting for you. You start a musical career.
Well, actually, I left Prattville in '74 to play music. That's what I did for the first 5 years. I didn't go into the military until I was 24.
Okay.
So actually, and we were talking about John Denver earlier. Stacy and I were. I actually played music with John Denver, and
wow,
this was in the '70s. Okay,
yeah,
and so I played music and I did my thing, and then I went into the Air Force and did that, and then when I came out, the reason I separated from the military after 13 years instead of going the whole 20 was I was about to make more rank, and I would be flying a desk the rest of my career, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to be teaching. And so I decided that I got an opportunity to learn a different trade, and I said, let me go for this. You mentioned that I've done a lot of things. I always tell people that's just because I'm old. I've just been around longer than a lot of people. And but I've always made it a point that anything that that I thought was interesting, I either learned it or did it. Mm-hmm. And
sure,
I just wanted to do everything. And so the world is a playground. It really is. When I got out of the military, it was like, wow, the freedom I now have to just go and do whatever I wanted to. So I learned to repair bathtubs and tile and countertops and things like that, and started the business up in Georgia. And then and I came down here and did some work down in Prattville, because my parents were living here, and so I would do some jobs down here, and we did like the pumpkin patch. And I had now I got to tell you this story real quick. Larry Owens, who anybody from the class of '73 knows, mm-hmm. was my classmate. The theater in the high school now is named the Larry Owens Theater. Larry Owens and I were really good friends, and we wrote. In speech class, we wrote a story because we had to write a script, and you call it a script today, but it wasn't really like a script. It was more like a story, but we had to illustrate it with pictures as if it was on TV or a movie or something. And we only had those little Polaroid Instamatic cameras back then, so we're just taking still shots. We wrote the saga of the rutabaga. And where we had the rutabaga born in a grocery store in Prattville, and then John Brown, our good friend, John Brown came and bought the rutabagas and befriended the rutabaga, and they became best friends. And so I was standing in the middle of the street in old downtown Prattville, taking still shots of John Brown walking down the street with this rutabaga, talking to it like they were best friends, or laying it on the ground, pretending like he was walking with it.
You get a few looks doing that.
Yeah, but it was just so much fun. So they go into the pool hall, which was downtown then, and they befriend Father Murphy, who was played by Larry Owens in his choir robe, dressed as a priest, and so they become best friends. So now they're a trio, and they go rock climbing up Pratt Hill, right below the cemetery. And the rutabaga tragically falls to its death. And so
terrible.
Yeah. So Larry's at the top with the rutabaga, and he kind of tosses it. And I try to take a picture of they're looking like they're reaching for it when they're really tossing it off the cliff. The first time it came, we bought 3 rutabagas. The first time it bounced all the way down to the road, and it bounced out of the frame before I could get the picture. So I threw it back up, and it took 3 tries to get it back up to them, because I was standing on the road and they were up at the cemetery.
Yeah.
So I throw it back up to them, It rolled down the hill like 3 or 4 times. It was getting pretty beat up by that point. So we decided to bring in rutabaga number 2, stand in. So we brought in that rutabaga. They had it up in the car. So they got it. They rolled it down. And I took a picture, and again, it bounced down the frame. Oh, man. And it went down in the road, so I'm trying to get you had to take the film out and develop it before you could see
what you got.
it looked like.
Right.
I got out of the frame again. I turned around, and a car ran over the rutabaga. So now we're down to number 3. So they get number 3, and I finally get the shot. So we had the death of the rutabaga. Then we had to have the burial of the rutabaga. And back then, you could go up to Pratt Cemetery. You could drive all the way up there. There was no barrier or anything back then. And so we had Larry Owens was a trumpet player in the band, so he had his trumpet case on his shoulder like it was the coffin, and John Brown was walking in front with his hands folded, priestly, and we went into the cemetery, Pratt Cemetery, and that's where we buried the rutabaga. Of course, not really, but that's where the picture showed. And then we had the resurrection of the rutabaga, where God and the devil were fighting over the soul of the rutabaga. So Larry Owens,
the rutabaga saga is in depth.
It's in depth. Yeah, I wrote it, and I was pretty proud of it. So John Brown is dressed as the devil in our. We were about to graduate high school. We had red robes, and so he was the devil, and Larry was God, and they were fighting over them.
Holy cow!
And the teacher just thought we were geniuses, and
or psychopaths, one or the other.
Yeah, we had the best time in old downtown Prattville shooting that thing. I've got a video on YouTube if you want to find it. It's on the SpiritWalking channel on YouTube, and it's called The Saga of the Rutabaga, and it tells the whole story, and I have a camera guy following me around to all the different locations and the teacher. But that was the class of 73. That is so fantastic.
So I feel like that may have the saga of the rutabaga, as it were, in 73, may have been what spurned you on to a stand-up comedy career.
Yeah,
which you did.
I always was into comedy. I've been a big fan of comedy since I was a little kid. I had what it was football. Andy Griffith's comedy album. I had all the early comedy albums. I was a big fan of Bob Newhart's stand-up comedy, even though he was the only stand-up comedian that made his living sitting down. Shelley Berman did the same thing. All these old comedians, and I could do all their acts. I loved their acts. And then when I was in the military, in probably 1981, we had a talent show, and they said you can enter different categories in the talent show. So I entered like 5 categories in the talent show, and I wasn't in the second act. And at the last minute, the guy that was supposed to MC the second act dropped out, and so they asked backstage if anybody wanted to introduce the acts, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I'm not in the second act. I was all through the first act. And they said, yeah, okay. So
here we go.
So then they said, there's 2 acts. You got to fill about 3 minutes because they're bands and they got to set up real quick and they got to, I said, what am I going to do on stage for 3 minutes? 3 to 5 minutes.
Without a rutabaga.
With no rutabaga,
no backup at all.
And by yourself on stage with a microphone, 3 to 5 minutes, it feels like an
is forever. Yeah. So luckily for me, being a big fan of comedians, Stephen Wright had just come out.
Wow. I love Stephen Wright.
And Stephen Wright had just come out. He had made one appearance that I saw on The Tonight Show. And he's a one-liner comedian like Henny Youngman. He's a throwback comedian. And deadpan, and just hilarious.
Hilarious, absolutely.
So I decided that I would write down everything I could remember that he said. And I wrote down a bunch of, because he's rapid fire, bam, bam, bam. So I wrote down, I have the oldest typewriter in the world that types in pencil, stuff like that. And I wrote down everything I could think of that he said. My
favorite Stephen Wright line is, last night I was walking in the forest and a tree fell right in front of me. And I didn't hear it.
He's just a brilliant comedian. And so I wrote down a bunch of stuff, and they said, well, you got 2 of them. And I said, well, that's not going to fill 2 of them. So I remembered Robin Williams doing The Wizard of Oz in like 30 seconds.
Right.
So
Hilarious.
I
If you've
did
never
my
seen
best.
that, go YouTube
It is
Robin
hilarious.
Williams, Wizard of Oz.
Well, I did not do it justice, but I did the best I could of the Wizard of Oz in 3 minutes. And I did the Stephen Wright, and everybody in the audience was and hardly anybody knew who Stephen Wright was, so they didn't know the material. So they thought I was a genius.
Like, oh my gosh, this guy's awesome. He's going places.
I can imagine, like, a couple months later when they see Stephen Wright on TV and they go, "Hey, he stole SpiritWalker's material. How did?"
But you actually performed with Robin Williams.
I did at 142 Throckmorton Theater in Marin County, California.
That is amazing. So you've met several of the world's greats as far as stand-up comedy goes.
As far as stand-up comedy, yeah, a lot.
I mean, you could list. I mean, your list goes on. It's like Robin Williams, Jay Leno, Dana Carvey.
Let me tell you,
Coulier.
you love Robin Williams. Let me tell you a good Robin Williams story. We were in the green room at 142 Throckmorton, and let me explain. First of all, Mark Pitta ran 142 Throckmorton. It's a theater in Marin County, which is a very wealthy county right across the bay from San Francisco. It's right there. And Robin had a house in Marin County. And so Mark Pitta rented this theater, this old bijou type theater, on Tuesday nights. Not a comedy night, not a weekend. But the reason he did Tuesday nights is because he knew all of the comedy clubs, like Cobb's Comedy Club, the Punchline, the Improv in San Jose was close, Rooster T. Feathers was close. There was like 6 major comedy clubs just a few miles from Marin County. And so he would call and say, "Who you got coming this weekend? Who do you got coming?" And he'd find out who all they had, and he would contact these headliners like Robin Williams, and he would say, "Hey, you see, the worst thing about being a really popular headliner like Robin Williams, you have no place to be bad.
Nowhere to practice.
Nowhere to practice new material, because when you go into a club, they want you to bring your A game. You know, they're paying you.
Right.
And so he would say, "Hey, I got a little comedy gym, if you will, to work out in on Tuesday nights. I can't pay you but a couple of $100. So I won't advertise that you're coming, because then I'd have to pay you scale, whatever their scale is. And you just show up and do whatever you want to do. You know, nobody will even know you're there." So he'd get a lot of big names in there, and we never knew he would also hire like 4 or 5 local comedians to do 15, 20 minutes on stage and give us $100, you know, and it was close to where I live. So if I didn't have a show going on Tuesday night, which is rare, and he wanted me to come, he'd say, "Hey, I'd go make $100 for 15 minutes. I mean, why not?"
Pretty good hourly rate.
Yeah. So, and you never knew who you were going to see in the green room. That was the cool thing. So every comedian wanted to, "Hey, Mark, you got a spot?" Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're in the green room. There's about 5 of us in the green room, and Robin Williams walks in the door, and we're just frozen all of a sudden, just like, Robin Williams is in the green room. And he said, no. He realized it was uncomfortable. He said, no. You guys go ahead and talk. Go ahead and talk. I like to hear your stories. I want to hear what your life is like. I want to, very, very engaging guy. So we're starting telling stories. A friend of mine named Jim Summers. Jim was a prison guard before he was a comedian, and he hurt his back. And they said they'd retrain him, and so they were going to give him money. And they said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I want to be a comedian." They said, "We don't know how to train you for that, but we'll just throw some money at you, and you can get some promotional gear." So he did. And he had all these great prison stories. So he starts talking, he starts telling Robin Williams about the TV show Oz and how it's not really reflective of prison life in real life, because there's no munchkins in Oz. And he said, "What do you mean there's no munchkins in Oz?" He says, "Do you think we didn't have midgets in prison? Of course we had midgets." He said,
But you can't say that now.
No, you have to call them little midgets. And
yeah, exactly. Proceed.
Yeah, I'm pretty politically incorrect, as you can see.
That is your email on there?
So anyway, he said, "I don't know if you know it or not, but it's hard to snake a midget out of a toilet." And Robin Williams thought that was just hilarious, right? So Robin says, what was he in for? And he said armed robbery. And so Robin Williams got on his knees and starts running around the room, holding people up, pretending he's a midget trying to do a stick up. How would that go? How would he accomplish this task? So he's running around just manic, as Robin Williams is.
Yes.
Somebody opened the door to the hallway, and there were people were standing in a line outside the hallway waiting to get in the theater when they opened the doors. Of course, it was inside, but they were in the hallway. And so somebody opened the door, and all of a sudden, and I can't remember if somebody came in or somebody was going in, just opened the door by accident. But anyway, the door opened, and there's this line of people, and they all, of course, look in the door, and there's Robin Williams just going berserk. Robin realizes the door's open, stops, stands up, straightens his shirt out, walks right out into the hallway, starts taking pictures with people, starts signing autographs, just greeting people. You're going to love the show. It's going to be great, And then just as calm. And then they start moving the line down. They open the doors and start moving the line. He says goodbye, shuts the door, and goes crazy again. It's like a switch. It was like boom, boom. It was like on, off. He was incredible.
And that's what made him great. He could just turn it on and turn it off whenever he wanted to, like a switch.
He could do it in a mid joke. That's what was so amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, he could be just telling a standard story, and then all of a sudden he's at 180 miles an hour.
He stands up and goes into a whole bit.
Yeah,
he's just riffing.
He said, hey guys, at the end of the show, because he was going to, of course, be last. He said, at the end of the show, anybody that wants to come up and do improv with me, you guys come on up. Let's do some improv. And nobody wanted to do it except me, because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Sure.
And I said, I get to do improv with Robin Williams.
Oh, so that'd be one of those once in a lifetime.
Exactly. And
better get up there.
I knew that it really meant doing improv with Robin Williams really means you're going to be furniture.
Yeah.
Because I'm a lamp. I'm just going to stand here and watch him. I had the best seat in the house. I was on stage with him. He's doing like 10, 15 minutes with some woman's feathered boa. You're just in awe. And so, yeah, that was pretty incredible.
One of the things that Robin Williams was able to do and able to pull off and get away with back in those days, I mean, like the Midgets and Oz bit.
Yeah.
If that got out today, Robin Williams is canceled. I mean, stand-up comedians particularly, seem to be like the target of the snowflake culture.
And what do you think about me being an American Indian? I'm supposed to be so politically correct, and I get up there and I say things like, yeah, the Washington Redskins name is offensive. Yes, it should have been changed, but it was a very easy fix. All they had to do is take out the offensive word and just rename themselves the Redskins, because they took out the wrong word, is what I'm saying.
So, when
I do stuff like
people off guard,
it does catch them off guard. But I'm amazed at the audiences, because they laugh and they enjoy themselves. I had one show I did with Brad Stein. I don't know if you know who Brad Stein is. Did a show with Brad Stein. So I opened for him. I did 30 minutes, something like that. And so the kind of audience that's going to come and see Brad Stein. And he was doing his All-American tour or something like that. And I was doing my Awake Not Woke tour at the time. And so we were a perfect match. And I did a lot of, non-politically correct stuff. And after the show, I was sitting there watching Brad. Guy walks by me, shakes my hand. Hey, man, I appreciate your comedy so much. You were hilarious. Shakes my hand. He puts a bill in my hand. And sometimes that happens. Somebody will tip you.
Yeah.
After the show, I'm standing outside, and we're just talking outside the club. And another guy comes up and does the same thing. And they weren't even together. And I got back to the hotel room, looked at the bills, because it's not polite to do it right then. So I got back to the hotel room. Each of them had tipped me a $100 bill.
Nice.
That never happened before.
Yeah.
I mean, 10, 20, but 100, because they appreciated the fresh approach that I wasn't going to pull the punches. I was going to talk about Indians, not Native Americans. In fact, I asked the audience, where were you born? Ohio? Okay. Alabama? Okay. Isn't that in America? Aren't you a Native American? Native American does not describe my people. But if you say an Indian or American Indian, you know.
Right.
My license plate, USA, NDN, American Indian. That's what
It is.
Are you familiar with Brad Williams?
Brad Williams. No,
He's a stand-up comedian that's a midget, and he is just he is outstanding. Yeah, look him up on YouTube. There's some great stuff about he fights the same fight you're fighting.
Right.
Like he steers into it. And it's
not offended by the term midget.
Yeah, and but finds the humor in it like everybody should.
And that's the thing. If you have a stereotype about your race or the way you look or whatever, embrace it. If you make fun of it, it takes the sting out of the insult.
Right.
There is no insult if I can make fun of it. I have a lot of Latino comedian friends that they blow it all out. I mean, Dennis Gaxiola is one of the Latin kings of comedy. He's a real good friend of mine, and he says some things on stage. I go, Dennis, I mean, how'd you get by with that?
Well, the way I see it is, cancel culture only works if you agree
Yeah, right.
to be canceled.
You have to agree to be canceled.
You have to agree to it, and you have to.
Didn't they cancel Rogan?
They tried to.
Yeah,
and he did not agree.
He just didn't agree.
Like, no, I'm going to keep doing this.
And you got the comedians like Dave Chappelle. I mean,
Chappelle is incredible.
He's the general. I mean, he's the lead. I mean, he saved comedy in my opinion because comedy was on the way out.
Yeah. Comedy was,
and him and Bill Burr and comedians like that just that's what comedy is all about, is to laugh at the absurdity of life.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
when
Bill Burr had that thing about Oprah Winfrey. Did you see that? There's a clip on Facebook.
Oh wow, she's not.
She stood on the head of the midgets. Right. Bill Burr, he don't care.
Yeah, he does.
And Chappelle, am I canceled or not? That's all I want to know. Am I canceled or not?
And when you don't bow,
somebody's got to say
when you don't bow to the woke mob,
right?
You can be whatever you want to be, because
Yeah.
they realize that they're the bullets they're shooting at you have no effect on you. You're not stopping, and that's how you win.
Because if I find it funny, somebody else is going to find it funny.
Yeah.
And whether you laugh at it privately and pretend that you don't find it funny or not, it's humor. It's funny.
We live in a day and age where laughter is needed more than anything. Laughter has always been the best medicine, and we're trying to take it away.
And the thing is, you see people like Bill Maher.
Yeah.
That 90% of the stuff I disagree with him on, but you know what? I can sit there and listen to him because he will call when his own side is BS. He'll call it out and call it out loudly.
Exactly.
And that's all you ask for. I mean, we all not going to have the same views and opinions about everything, but just don't try to shut mine down because you don't like it.
Yeah. I don't do political comedy, but to me, a successful political joke is one that makes both parties laugh.
Sure.
That's a successful joke.
Yeah.
And I mean, funny is funny.
Funny is funny.
When I first went full time into stand up back in 2000, I had a comedy club owner tell me, he said, funny trumps everything. If you're funny, you're funny. It doesn't matter what you look like, what your political opinion is, what your religious beliefs are. Funny is funny. Just concentrate on funny. And that's absolutely true.
And the greatest comedians are the ones that can do it without being dirty. They can make you laugh.
You think of the highest grossing comedians in history were all clean comedians.
Mm-hmm. So if I've got my 14-year-old, we're going to a SpiritWalker show. I'm not gonna have to cringe and gosh, don't listen to that.
No, all my material
exactly
is clean. I did a show with Jay Leno at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach.
Jay Leno.
Yeah, you might have heard of him.
Might have heard of old Jay.
I'll tell you how that came about too. But anyway, and the first thing Jay said is, do you write clean? And I said, yes, sir. He said, always write clean. Always write clean. You can dirty it up if you want to for the situation, but you can't make a dirty joke clean. Mm-hmm. Always write clean. And I always have. He didn't have to tell me that to get me to do it, but that was good advice from one of the top grossing comedians of all time.
Exactly. Got a garage to
Jay
prove it.
Leno. Look at Jeff Foxworthy. Look at Seinfeld. Nobody topped him in income for years. No comedian came close to him. Clean comedian. All these comedians, they're clean comedians. They're we talk about Chappelle and all that, and he's definitely not a clean comedian. But I'm just saying, you can always dirty something up, but you can't make a dirty joke clean. It just doesn't work. So I work only clean. I want my mom to be able to come to my show.
Hey,
There you go.
I want to apologize for it. When I was 15 years old, I had my headset on listening to Eddie Murphy Raw, and I was I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. My mom walks in the door. What are you listening to? Nothing.
Yeah,
But no way I was pulling those earphone jack out.
But Eddie Murphy, if he took out all the coarse language in that bit, it's still funny.
Yeah, it's still funny.
It's still funny. The subject matter is still funny.
yeah. When he's talking about running into a tree, snakes will make you run into a tree. I mean, Eddie Murphy Raw and what was the other special he had?
Delirious.
Mm-hmm.
I had both of those on VHS. I mean, I would watch them all the time because I loved Eddie Murphy.
But it takes a pretty brilliant mind to be able to do that.
It does.
To be able to
And even one of his greatest bits he ever did was with him and talking about him and Richard Pryor discussing Bill Cosby talking about the language that he uses. That's still one of the greatest bits that he's ever done. And he hits on that. Bill Cosby is wanting him to do. I need to speak to you about the language that you use. And then of course, the Richard Pryor classic line, tell Bill I said have a Coke and a smile and we won't finish the rest of it.
Yeah, Bill Cosby, another clean comedian in the top 5 grossers in comedians.
Yeah. Well, now you mentioned the comedy greats, and one of the comedy greats that I think you've taken a lot of inspiration from. You said earlier was Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith,
and that's led you into a whole nother career that we need to get into of being an actual author.
Actually, I had 2 fiction novels published in early 2000. My first novel came out in 2001. My second one came out in 2003. But they were fiction novels that I wrote, sold to a publisher, Dorchester Press. And I finished 3 other fiction novels. I still have them. I just haven't shopped them around and sold them yet. But this was my first attempt at a nonfiction book, this one here. And the Andy Griffith Show has always been a fascination to me because it started on October 3rd, 1960, and it's never been off the air.
Right.
In 62 years. It's never been off the air. How did they create such a masterpiece of television history, and why isn't it more popular than it is among more people? You would think. And so I started. I joined a lot of Facebook groups, Andy Griffith Show Facebook groups, and I started asking questions about the show and talking. And there's a lot of Facebook groups out there, Andy Griffith Show, and I started to realize there's more of a community than I thought. And I found the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club, which started in Vanderbilt University in 1979 in a frat house.
The Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club.
Yes.
Started in a Vanderbilt
Tags
frat house.
RWC. Started with Jim Clark and 3 frat brothers in the frat house in Vanderbilt. And every day at 5 o'clock, reruns would come on one channel of MASH and the other channel or another channel of the Andy Griffith Show. So he and his 3 friends started the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club, where they would commandeer the TV every day at 5 o'clock so they could watch reruns of the Andy Griffith Show. And it became even one of the pledge questions on their questionnaire was, what does tags RWC stand for? And so it became this thing. Well, a radio host picked it up, interviewed them, and they ended up writing a book together. And then it just grew from there. Now it has 1,478 chapters worldwide. There are tens of thousands of members of the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club since 1979 to this day. It's still going strong. And now they've scheduled events all across the United States, and it's amazing. It's the amount of people that are so interested in the Andy Griffith Show. Well, I started researching things. I started noticing things in the background and asking myself questions. What is that? What is that poster I keep seeing on the bulletin board? I wonder what that poster is. And so I started doing research and finding things. And I would go on these groups and I would ask questions, and they'd give me answers to the questions. And I started realizing that some of the answers weren't exactly correct. Mm-hmm. And so I'd research and I'd say, hey, that's not right. The real answer is this. And I began trying to correct some of the mistakes I kept seeing on these groups. And I'd get, no. I know I read that somewhere. Okay.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to start my own group. So I started the Andy Griffith Show Esquire Club. It's on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/TAGS Esquire Club.
Tags Esquire.
Tags Esquire Club. Got to put the club on there. And so I started this group, and I started posting pictures showing this information is incorrect. Look at this picture. Look at this. Look at that. And so I started doing this thing, and I started getting a lot of members. I thought I'd get a couple hundred maybe at the most. Now I have 2,200 easy, And I never thought I'd get that big. I didn't care. I just wanted to get the real right information out there. Well, one day, and I discovered a podcast called Two Chairs, No Waiting, which is run by a Floyd the Barber tribute artist. It comes from an episode of the Andy Griffith Show where Floyd is talking about he always wanted the two-chair shop because he has the magazines to swing it. And so Two Chairs, No Waiting is run by this Floyd the Barber tribute artist. It's been going since 2008, every week. It's been going longer than the Andy Griffith Show was produced on the air. Mm-hmm. And so he started this podcast, and so I started listening to all of his back episodes. He had almost 600 at the time I discovered it, so I had a lot of episodes to catch up on. So I'm watching all the back ones, or listening to the back ones when I'm in my car, and then I'd watch the YouTube video of the new ones every week. And he was interviewing this guy named Randy Turner, who contributed to the podcast with a segment called "This Week in This Week in Mayberry History." I'll get it right. Thanks. Sorry, Randy, because I know Randy's listening to this podcast. He subscribed. So anyway, I was watching Randy Turner, and this was an interview with Randy Turner. And so his picture was up there and his name across the bottom. And I was talking to somebody on my Facebook group, answering some questions about the church on the 40-acre lot. And so we were talking back and forth, and I'm looking up and I'm looking down, I'm looking up, I'm looking down. And then I realized that the name I'm seeing on my TV screen is the same name I'm seeing the guy I'm talking to. He's a member of my Facebook group, this guy that's on. And so I said, "Are you that Randy Turner?" And he said, "Yeah, you got me. That's me." So we started talking, and he's a researcher from way back. He's written a bunch of books, and he started a publishing company, which is Liberty Grove Press.
Liberty Grove Press.
Yep.
Greater Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm. And it's mayberrybooks.com. And so he and I started talking. I said, "I'm thinking about writing a book." And he said, "Man, you need to stop posting what you're posting right now so you can put it in the book, because you're giving away some stuff I have never seen anywhere else." So every day I would write on the book, and I'd send it to him, and he would look at it, and he would correct, or he would add to anything that I said. And so eventually we had this book, and he contracted me to write 8 books.
And this is the first.
That's the first one, because it's only season 1. That's only season 1. He wanted me to write all 8 seasons. I said, "Randy, you know how thick that book's going to be?" He said, "Really? Is there that much?" I said, "Yeah, wait."
Mayberry Rerun Watcher's Guide, Season 1.
Season 1. That's only season 1.
Now, to me, Andy Griffith, it seems like it died when it went to color.
And there's a lot of theories about that. I'll tell you my theory. And you watched my YouTube video. I just dropped my first YouTube channel on the Andy Griffith Show called Spirit of Mayberry. And I just dropped it on October 3rd because that was the 62nd anniversary exactly of the Andy Griffith Show. And I stayed on there why I think the Andy Griffith Show is still popular today, 62 years later. And it ties into what you're talking about with when it went from season 5 to season 6, it went into color. But also some other things changed. Barney left. Don
Warren.
Knotts.
Oh, here comes Warren.
Don Knotts left. Now, Jack Burns, who played Warren Ferguson, got a bad deal.
Very bad.
Because Jack Burns was actually a very funny comedian. He was George Carlin's first comedy partner.
It's like Ray Perkins coming back in behind the bear. I mean,
It's not gonna be good. You don't want to be the guy that replaces the man.
Because they were still writing for Don Knotts, trying to make Warren Don, and he wasn't. He was
Not
a
at
different character. Maybe if they would have stuck with Jerry Van Dyke, if they could have talked Jerry Van Dyke into it, he might have been closer. He was in the last black and white episode, Jerry Van Dyke, Dick Van Dyke's little brother. But anyway,
Hayden Fox's assistant coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Warren got a bad deal. But I think one of the things that makes the Andy Griffith Show appealing is the hometown feel.
Yes.
Okay. And so you saw Mayberry. I say in my video, I love the Bob Newhart show, but I couldn't tell you anything about Chicago. I loved the Dick Van Dyke show, but I couldn't tell you anything about New Rochelle, New York. I don't know how they got to work. I don't know where their office buildings were. I don't know where their houses were. But you could put me down in Mayberry today, and I could walk to Andy's house. I know exactly where it is. I have walked the streets of Mayberry. It's my hometown. I can't go back. Prattville has changed so much since I was in high school. Mm-hmm. It's not like the hometown I grew up in, but Mayberry is still the same.
It's small town America.
Yeah.
Everybody can relate.
Exactly. Now, when it went to color, another thing that changed was they stopped shooting on location at the 40-acre backlot where the town of Mayberry was, and they filmed in the studio, and they rebuilt the sets. When they're sitting out in front of Floyd's Barbershop, it's a set in a studio in Hollywood.
Not the same
Desilu
effect.
Kahanga Studios.
Right.
It's not the same feel. It doesn't feel like Mayberry anymore. It feels like a sitcom.
But it was cheaper to shoot it that way.
But it was cheaper, and the 40-acre backlot was falling down by that time. I mean, it was you watch the episodes, you can see chips out of the brick facades. You know, they were all facades. There were only 2 buildings on the whole place that were real buildings. One was a central building that had Walker's Drug Store in the first season, and the other was the church. Other than that, they were all facades. They had no backs to them. There was no interior of Andy's house. There was no interior of any of the houses. And Thelma Lou's house was shot across the street from the Desilu Kahanga Studios in Hollywood. It had a real house, but they couldn't shoot inside because there were people that lived in that house. They only had permission to shoot the outside. So when you go through Thelma Lou's door, you're going back across the street into the studio.
So I guess the reason Mayberry is just so precious to so many people, and Andy Griffith Show's lasted as long as it has and still on TV today, is because anybody can sit in front of it, anybody can watch and not be triggered and not feel offended. But it's wholesome, old school advice on parenting, advice on relationships. I mean, everything. Andy Griffith is Americana.
It is all about relationships. The whole thing is about relationships. The first relationship is the father-son relationship between Andy and Opie. But then there's the best friend relationship between Andy and Barney. I mean, how many sheriffs in real life are going to keep an inept deputy on their force for so long? But Andy always coached him along, always made him look good. It was about friendship. It was about, you don't tear your friends down, you build them up, you keep encouraging them, and you just keep that relationship going. And Andy treated everybody on the show with respect. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had a town drunk, and Andy always coaxed him along and tried to help him out and tried to encourage him, you know, things like that. You had bums that would come into town. He would do the same thing. There was everybody had a worth. And that's what the Andy Griffith Show is about. It's about that hometown feeling of people caring about their neighbors, people caring about each other.
Even when they disagree on things.
Even when they disagree.
Which is totally opposite of today.
Exactly.
If I disagree with you, disagree with me, I mean, if there are people, I mean, this left wing, right wing thing, if there's a political disagreement now, well, we just can't be friends anymore.
Right.
This is ridiculous. This is
Now,
crazy.
The biggest event of the Andy Griffith Show is Mayberry Days in Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is Andy Griffith's hometown. And most everything was based, even though Andy for years and years denied that the Andy Griffith Show, that Mayberry was based on Mount Airy, North Carolina. He finally had to admit it when they changed the name of one of the highways up there to the Andy Griffith Parkway. Mm-hmm. And at his acceptance speech, he said, for years, everybody's always asked me if Mayberry was based on Mount Airy. And then he looks around and he goes, sure looks like it, don't it? And he just smiled real big because people in the town were named after people he knew growing up. Mayberry is after Mayberry, Virginia, which is just north of Mount Airy, where his mother grew up. I mean, there's so many things that are involved. And they turned Mount Airy into Mayberry once a year for a week. It started out a day, and now it's a week. It's called Mayberry Days. It's the last full week of September. Full weekend in September. The weekend has if the Sunday is in November, then, I mean, in October, then it doesn't, that's not the last full week. So anyway, I just returned from there, and it was incredible that nobody cared what race you were. I saw all races there. I guarantee you, all races were there buying and looking and doing things. They didn't care what religion you were. They didn't care what you believed politically. It didn't matter.
Wouldn't it be nice to live in a society like that?
It didn't matter. They were friends. Everybody was instant friends. And just talking and laughing and having a great time. It was Mayberry. Now, my question to you is, why can't we do that in Prattville?
Absolutely.
Why can't we? You know, you had a council member on a couple podcasts ago that was talking about the downtown area and how they're building the new apartments down there. I love old downtown Prattville. I just live right over the hill from it, and I go down there a lot. And you were talking about you'd like to see it closed off and be pedestrians only, right? The downtown street, right? Why can't we do that and have a Mayberry event called the Spirit of Mayberry, where we turn Prattville into Mayberry for a day?
It's not far from it. You know, you got the barbershop right there.
Exactly. The barbershop is perfect. I every time I go by there, I think Floyd's.
Creekside Barbershop is like Floyd.
Yeah.
Originally the Friendly Barbershop.
Yeah.
That's where I've had my head cut on there so many times over the years. It's not, that's pretty much my primary barbershop's been since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, see, I've spent my life trying not to get my hair cut.
You've done a pretty good job of it.
But what if we could organize a Mayberry event in Prattville? How can we get the city council behind us to do this? Because I can get tribute artists, I can get squad cars. There are.
Well, you just go and have a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce, or go have a conversation with our dear mayor, and so get them behind it, and next thing you know, it'll happen.
So I'm putting it out here on the Preferred Podcast. If anybody's interested, get in touch with me and let's talk about it.
How do we get in touch with you?
Tags, TAGS RL55.
Tags RL55.
Yeah, at gmail.com.
Tags RL55 at gmail.com. And also you can find you on Facebook.
Yes, at the Andy Griffith Show Esquire Club.
Yes.
Tags Esquire Club.
Well, SpiritWalker, has been a real privilege to talk to you today. And by the way, is this book available already?
You can go to mayberrybooks.com and order the book.
Mayberrybooks.com.
Yep, all one word, mayberrybooks.com.
Get your copy of the Mayberry Rerun Watcher's Guide.
Or you can go to weaversdepartmentstore.com as well.
Okay, so now we're heading into our Poetic Justice segment, where Chip Powell will deliver us something from his litany, his library, deep collection of poetry. And this is, according to Millzer, going to be an all-timer.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique situation. You know, Chip has been away from us for a while now, and I told him, hey, man, you can't keep missing episodes. Poetic Justice is the engine that drives this motor. engine drives his motor.
Well said.
No, he. So I told him he had to bite the bullet, and he had to record one while he was in Montana and send it to us. And he actually pulled it off. I could not believe it.
Shockingly.
And if anybody knows Chip Powell, they'll know how just unbelievable that feat really is. Let's check out what he has to say here in this episode of Poetic Justice.
Let's do it.
Hey, this is Poetic Justice again. Listen, it's going to be a little different tonight. I'm under the tent in Montana. I'm on an elk hunt and got 3 or 4 other guys here in the tent with me. And I don't know if you can hear them snoring, but I don't want to wake them up. These guys are hard-nosed killers. I don't think they really share the love of poetry that I have. Again, I'm Chip Powell. Sorry about got to be kind of quiet, but don't want to disrupt these guys. But real quick, I wanted to get this poem in because it really, first of all, it's called The White Wolf. And believe it or not, back in my days in Auburn, I was known a little bit as the Lone White Wolf back there in the secondary. But never mind that. We'll get back to the story. The poem is by Amelia Fox, a 20th century Native American poet, called The White Wolf. The snowy grounds shines with the white moon. My silent paws are the only mark in the wilderness. The pines tower over that sky further than I can reach. In the darkness, my pack lie together. Oh, hey. Oh, I hear something outside the tent. This is not part of the poem. I'm serious. There's something outside the tent. Oh, shit. Okay, I think it's gone. Yeah, I don't hear anything. Okay, but I am alone. I howl to the moon, letting the anger out of me, all the past I leave behind. And I will go now like the silver phantom. I will run with the song of the wind, leave my pack, for I am the white wolf. Speaking of wolves, I'm going to curl up next to this guy that's bigger than me and get in his sleeping bag with him so I don't get eat. Hey, thanks for joining me. Well, be back next week. Thanks.
He's with us.
That's your friend?
That's our friend.
Right.
That's our friendship.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that he improperly labeled the author as Native American.
Native American.
I mean, no, American Indian is more like it.
Well, that's probably why the wolf came after him.
Probably so.
That ain't right.
Knew better.
That ain't right.
Well, SpiritWalker, it's been a pleasure having you. Like I said before, come back anytime. And let's make this Mayberry thing happen here in Prattville.
Let's do it. I really want to do that. I've talked to tribute artists all over the place, and they're all, yeah, the more the merrier. Let's do it.
It would be so cool.
I can get Gomer and Goober, and Gomer and Goober are from Alabama. Jim
right.
Neighbors was born in Sylacauga.
That's right.
And Goober, of course, George Lindsay, he was born in Jasper, and so. Yeah,
that's what, two of the great Alabamians. We need to get them in.
And 2 of the best Mayberians. I mean, they made the show, great. So yeah, and Floyd the Barber, tribute artist that runs 2 Chairs No Wedding, is just right up in Huntsville. He's got a squad car.
Let's bring him on down.
We got tons of the guy that plays Otis is in Gordo.
Well, let's make this happen.
Yeah,
let's
do it. Contact me. Come on.
All right, and let's also make happen our closing thought today. It comes from the man, the myth, the legend, the athletic director of Prattville Junior High School, and the head football coach of the Cats, Coach Donny Burnett, with our motivational minute.
This is Coach Donny Burnett, and here's today's motivational minute. Make yourself necessary to somebody. The only difference between a good day and a bad day is your attitude. This is Coach Donny Burnett, and that's today's motivational minute.
Well, if that don't get you ready to be sent off until we meet again, nothing will. Nothing will.
Yeah, you notice how his motivational minute's usually about 22 seconds.
It's just about 22 seconds. We got to get the full intro and outro to get the full minute in.
Well, hey, like we alluded to, it's football season. We're just lucky we're getting something in the can.
We're lucky to be here today.
Yeah,
exactly, exactly. So for the Millzer over there behind the Podcastatron 5000, and for SpiritWalker, who's been so gracious to join us today, I'm Will Barrett saying, as always, good night, God bless, and go Lions.
All right, it's going to do it for this week. Man, Will, love you coming in, pinch hitting, and dude, you hit a grand slam tonight.
Well, expect nothing less from me, Daryl. I'm the best.